So good evening, everyone. So I am one of the co-chairs. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join the at the last meeting. I was vacationing in Mexico, so I couldn't bring myself to join. Sorry, but I understand Eric, co-chair Eric here on my right, we did a great job with the meeting. So we're going to back and forth at team trade lead responsibilities for the meeting. So I'm going to take points today, but Eric's my backup when I start going sideways, so he'll pull me back on track. So the first item that we have, well, first of all, we have a quorum tonight. We have, I believe, 15 members, which clearly is a quorum. We have 2 members that have excused absences tonight, and meeting minutes to show those members with excused absences. I think first on our, first a little bit about me, since I think everybody did that meeting. So I'm retired a couple of years ago, retired after a 36-year career with the city of Bellevue, majority of it as a director of the Development Services Department, and then also served as a deputy city manager in the city manager's office before I left the city. I have served on the Development Commission for over 15 years now, I think. I've seen a lot of projects come through and actually get built and watch the city grow. Learned a lot from the experience on the commission and working with great folks there. And I really look forward to serving with this group. Sounds like a well-qualified committee group, so I'm looking forward to that. So first item on the agenda is to approve the meeting minutes. Were there any amendments or changes that anybody would like to make to the minutes? You had a chance to look at those. Okay, none. So we will then confirm that those meeting minutes are accurate and equal. So next topic on the agenda is a quick presentation or short presentation by the city clerk, Tisha Gieser, regarding the open meetings, open public meetings.
Yeah, or public comment too.
Oh, excuse me, public comment, right. Yes, let's do public comment. So first of all, is there anyone from the public who would like to make comments? We do have one in the room. So before you begin, really quick, some guidelines here. Please direct your comments to the whole board or the task force. And while this is not a question and answer session, we'll contact you if there's some follow-up. Staff will follow up with you. Please state your name, your address, and your relationship to the city. Speak clearly, pause frequently, and please limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
So for some of you that were here last week, and introduce myself, my name is Chris Craven. I am a city Issaquah Arts Commissioner, board member of local nonprofit, and I'm also a citizen since 2012 in Old Town. And I again applied the people sitting in this room on this task force, and so now is my opportunity to comment. I wanted to comment on the City Hall site selection that's later in the agenda. And with the public comments coming at the beginning, it's a little odd. But just wanted to sort of put out there that, what we're looking at needs to address Issaquah like 50 years from now, not just today. And thinking about walkability, I'm really interested in maintaining and improving the walkability of my city. To walk around Old Town, walk from my residence to the restaurants and the library and the public events. And so as you're kind of looking at the City Hall site, I know there's several different sites that you'll be looking at. I want to put out there the possibility for you to think about, and again, we're talking 50 years out, what would it look like to vacate the short section of First Avenue and Rainier Boulevard and those angled in parking and make the site adjacent to the current City Hall much bigger footprint, and possibly having a shared parking facility there that would not only facilitate the civic facilities, but also help facilitate more more events, more pedestrian events in Old Town and Front Street, and as it relates to the current festivals we have, but just also looking, backwards to closures that we had in 2021, I believe, from COVID of Front Street and bringing those businesses out. And I've always heard that the obstacle for that is the parking and access for those businesses. So, something that could be beneficial to both. So I thank you for your time, and I will not be able to be at the 22nd, which I understand you'll probably be diving much more into the sites and specifics on that. So thank you for your time. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Chris. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to make public comment? Is there anyone online that would like to comment? If you are using Teams, you raise your hand, or if you're on your phone, press *5.
We've got all staff.
All staff, okay, great. Okay, then we can move on to the next topic on the agenda, which is the presentation by the city clerk on the Open Public Meetings Act and Public Records Management.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tisha Geezer. I'm the city clerk. I know some of you serve on other advisory boards or on our city council, but thank you for being here. Thank you for helping our city solve this big problem. So I'm just here to talk to you about I'm going to give you a real brief training and then talk to you a little bit about some discussion norms and guidelines we have for groups such as yours that are needing to work through policy issues. So first, I'm going to talk to you, and again, my apologies for those of you who do serve on boards, commissions, or the city council. You've heard this training a few times, so bear with me, please. But for all of you who are new to serving on a city board, one of the things that we're obligated to do is train you on the city's sunshine laws. And so Washington state really values transparency in government. And so there's 2 state laws that, and Jason, you just heard this training. I'm so sorry. Yeah, you can probably give the training. We're going to do an abbreviated version. So the 2 state laws that fall into this category are Open Public Meetings Act and our Public Records Act. And I'm going to briefly touch on both of those. So the Open Public Meetings Act, sort of by its name, implies what it's all about. Just making sure that any meeting where public policies are being discussed, recommendations are being made, are open to the public. It means we're going to keep that front door propped for the entirety of your meeting so anyone can come in at any point to listen to you, listen to your deliberations. It means we publish the password for the virtual meetings. So anyone can come in at any time to listen, observe, make comments. And so we have an obligation to do that. There's very few exceptions to this rule. And we have a lot of requirements that staff take care of. The city clerk's office handles a lot of these to ensure your meetings comply. I just wanted to briefly touch on them. One thing that is required is that your agendas are provided in advance. You're noticing your agendas are typically coming out the Friday before the meeting. Meeting minutes must be taken. So thank you to whomever is helping to document these meetings. We also are recording your meetings, so their video is posted to YouTube after the fact. As I mentioned, we have to have your meetings at an open location where people can physically get in at any point. If final action is being taken, we have to allow for public comment to be accepted. But again, it's a standing item on all of your agendas. So we're making sure that's addressed. And then there are some sort of restrictions that relate to special meetings, which I'm not going to go into today because they don't relate too much to the task force. Basically, the discussion should stick with your agenda items. So one other thing I wanted to mention here, and I'm not going to really focus on this quorum issue with this group. Most of our city council and our advisory boards range from 3 to 13 members. And so one of the things we have to think about is if we might have a quorum, which is the majority of the group, meeting outside of a meeting and possibly talking about board or council business that's not allowed. You have a big group. Your quorum is 12. I was thinking it's probably unlikely that 12 of you are going to be together at any one point in time talking about the city's facility. So I'm not going to caution you about that, but I do just want to share with you that we hope that you save your discussions about these topics for the meeting. So if you have a person or two that you're wanting to debrief with or bounce ideas off of, that's okay. But the goal is that you're having your discussions in the open. That can mean they're a little messy because you come into the meeting not knowing what people are thinking, and maybe it's a little vulnerable sometimes because you have to just kind of put yourself out there. But that is the way it's intended to be, and that's our expectation. So try and keep those discussions, and we don't want you sharing emails, for example, like doing any group emailing to kind of get people's perspectives. Please avoid that. Please, again, if you have a person or two or even three that you want to touch base with, that's fine, but no dissemination of information. If you have anything you want shared with the task force, just to prevent any issues of there being sort of email discussion outside of a meeting, I'd recommend you email something to Autumn, and she could certainly distribute it on your behalf if you had some information, something like that you wanted shared with the group. Does that make sense? Right. Okay, so I'm going to move real quick to the Public Records Act. So this was interesting to me when I started working in local government, but it does make sense that public needs to have access to information that we as public agencies create. And this means anyone anywhere in the world can request records from us. They can request records related to me, any communication I've sent or received in the 9 years I worked here. They can request any information about a facility, a project, a topic, and we are obligated to provide those records. And so anyone who's working with us, even in this appointed volunteer capacity, needs to be aware of that, because it means some records you create could be subject to public disclosure. So I'm going to just talk to you about a couple things I think might be helpful for you to know. So by and large, all the information that you're getting as you serve on the task force is coming to you by way of your meeting agendas, and maybe some additional information by email. Anything going to you from the city, you don't need to worry about retaining. We've got it. We will keep our copies, and you're good, and you can do what you will with that content. But if there's anything you generate yourself, I'd like you to think about it. So if you generate notes, if you're a note taker, that's great. Under our records rules, notes are transitory. So you take notes, they've served the purpose to you, you can get rid of them, you can delete them, you can shred them if you're taking paper notes. You don't need to keep them. If you do choose to keep them and we get a public records request, we would reach out to you and say, did you take any notes on this topic or whatever it might be that we're being requested for? So if you choose to retain your notes, just keep them somewhere where you keep them together and keep them somewhere where you could easily locate them. And again, you can get rid of those when they're no longer useful to you. The second thing is I was thinking it might be possible you get some information from us and you want to organize it in a different way. Maybe you're going to generate a document in your service on our task force. If you do that, just share it with us. Just send it by email so we have a copy and we'll put it in our files. And then the last thing that I think could potentially come up, if anyone reaches out to you in your role as a task force member directly to you by email, or a group of you that don't include a staff person, I'd recommend you forward your email to staff or copy them in your reply so that all of our emails are retained that way. We'll have the email as well. So those are the scenarios I can think of that might relate to your work on the task force. Sound good? Okay. Great. And then I wanted to take just a couple minutes because I also help train our boards and commissions on Robert's Rules of Order and meeting procedures. You're a big group, got some hard issues to work through. So I wanted to share some of our meeting kind of norms. As I mentioned, we follow Robert's Rules for our meeting procedures. So I'm going to go over these fairly quickly here and let me know if you have any questions. So one of the things to keep in mind is that for meetings of deliberative bodies like yours, it can feel a little formal, but we have special rules for discussion or debate. And one of them is that you need to be recognized to speak. And that can feel constraining sometimes, but it really does help for an orderly meeting, and it helps ensure we're hearing from all of you. So have you developed a system yet of how you indicate you'd like to speak? Okay, awesome. And the co-chairs are going to do their very best to keep their eyes on those. And so if you haven't been recognized, it's your duty to remain silent. That also means no talking kind of on the side, because that's distracting and also is an issue for our recording purposes. So you have a duty to remain silent until you're acknowledged by the chair. And then everyone should have a chance to speak first before anyone speaks the second time. And this is, again, we have 23 of you. We want to hear from 23 of you. We want diverse perspectives. And so we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for anyone to comment first. The co-chairs will do their best to manage that. It doesn't mean everyone has to talk, but it means if someone has already talked once, the co-chair can say, is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to talk before I acknowledge, Jason before he makes comment? So letting you know that that's an expectation we have. And then you have robust agendas. There are many of you that I'm sure have thoughts. And so just be organized, be ready with your talking points. So what we don't want in these meetings is a kind of a conversational dynamic between two people. It might mean you have to wait for a while to make your comments. So be ready to share. I would say also, as far as questions go, kind of treat it the same way. So if you have 10 questions after a presentation, you maybe pick your first two questions and then let some other folks ask theirs instead of just kind of dominating. So again, just be mindful of that group dynamic. And then I did want to mention that I know you're probably a few meetings away from this, but if you're needing to make recommendations or kind of pick a direction to go, there may be a need for a vote. Just because consensus is always a great thing, but especially a group of this size, there's going to be different opinions. And so I do think there might be a time where it's just cleaner to sort of ask everyone to, put on the record if you're for or against a certain decision to help you as you move to outcomes. So I just wanted to say that, and we can help you as co-chairs if things get to that point. But usually that's a simple, are you in favor, aye, or you not, no. That was really all I wanted to share regarding meeting discussion. I think that's it. Yeah.
Real quick on the meetings, that was very good, because you're right, this is a big group, and I think we've all been in groups before about trying to establish some meeting norms or ground rules. I thought it might be useful, though, just real quick to go back to that slide and see other things that aren't on there that we want to put on there that will help us keep our discussions productive, civil, because I think we're going to get into some fairly meaty topics down the road. We've all been in, I think, group meetings before where we had ground rules. And so are there things that you remember that you thought were really useful that we should add to the list? I have one that I would put on that I always find useful, and that's to really focus on interests and not positions when we get into discussions when we're trying to get to a conclusion on something. Stay on interest and don't take a position, because that's where tensions kind of get amped up a little bit, as one example.
And I see a name.
We was going to have like a parking lot meeting, and things that might be not be in scope, or we might want to think about later. That way we don't spend too much time on it.
So reading names up the side.
What do you mean by interest as opposed to position?
So some people will, I guess it's kind of tricky semantics, but when you're standing and defending something, like I think it should be at this location and here's why, and you're not going to change my mind, instead of I think this is the best location and here's why I think that. So that it's a little less, standing firm and a little bit more open and the dialogue. And I think the other part of it too is asking questions to understand. When you're asking people more about what their interests are, it's not about challenging them, locally disagreeing with them. It's like, help me understand why you think that. Those are, I find, very productive ways to try to keep the dialogue really productive. Any other thoughts? Any other sideways name tags? Okay. We can always add as we go along. If there's some things that you want to suggest that would help us as we move along, we can always add to kind of our list of guidelines of ground rules. Thanks, Tisha.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that some of us have seen that before, but it's always useful to hear it again because it's easy to forget in the public sector rules and obligations that we have. So the rest of the topics, as the last one, are really mostly informational for us tonight, more background information. There's going to be opportunities for questions. I think we're going to get into more of dialogue at later meetings, trying to come to draw some kind of formal conclusions that we want to recommend. But tonight we'll continue to learn, I think, is really the topics that are in front of us. So next up is the recap of the visioning exercise. And I want to hear more about this because I wasn't here to participate from the last meeting. And Ryan White is
Justin's
Oh, I'm sorry. Justin, you're going to do that. Okay. Thanks, Justin. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. For anybody who wasn't here last time, Justin Stronzel with DLR Group. We are the firm contracted by the city to assist with this community outreach effort. And with me tonight are Lori Koppenrath of DLR Group and Amy Wallner of DLR Group. So I'm going to talk through, we spent a considerable amount of time last session on the March 18th session on your vision for the future facilities. We haven't locked in anything, but I want to recap what we heard. And we tried to consolidate, this isn't everything that we heard. We tried to consolidate the messages on the screen here. We have documentation of everything to share, but these are kind of the big picture themes that came out of our last meeting. So everything is on the table, was the first thing that was stated. And I thought that was valuable feedback. There was a lot of emphasis on third place kind of environments, not home, not work, but a place for people to gather. Also an emphasis on village feel in the community spaces. There was a desire that police are safe in their facility. There's a sentiment that is not the case in today's police facility. Requests for Old Town to serve as the civic campus for the city. Consolidation of services, resources, access. There was a lot of discussion about the lack of a front counter right now. Certainly there is a counter in the building, but it's really more, you're walking in. Is this for City Hall? Is this for police? A place for the public who has to do business with the city or interact with the city to know where they're going and feel welcome. Strong desire for community meeting spaces that can be accessed by the public in a variety of manners. Next slide, please. Creating better spaces for employees. Right now, there's people are cramped, challenged to do their job in the environment that they're in. A desire to separate police and city hall functions, not necessarily have them in the same facility as they are today. Address the police fleet, that meaning the police department's vehicles, finding a safe place for those. Managing public dollars responsibly and phasing our priorities. So come up with a plan that, even if this task force doesn't make a recommendation of things that have to happen today, also be thinking about what should be happening in the future, long-term plan. So those were big, kind of the overarching themes that we heard last session. We had asked everybody to kind of sleep on, there was a lot of discussion, a lot to absorb. We asked everybody to kind of sleep on it, think about it. There was a QR code that was shared. No, I don't believe that we got feedback. We got a QR code in that.
All of these, but yeah, I think it's more of a question.
So I would really like to hear, is there anything after you had a chance to digest everything you heard last time? Is there anything that's missing from the vision that was just presented here?
Any additional thoughts as you slept on it?
I think that what I, not from our last meeting, but from the tour and the discussion with the police, I believe there's no real synergy between the police department and their operations and the city administration. There's a very minor synergy, so they don't necessarily have.
Jonathan, any other follow-up thoughts?
You referenced the tour. I know there were quite a few of you who hadn't been on the tour when we met on March 18th. For those of you who did, were anything from the vision that comes out of that? Co-chairs, may I recognize?
Oh, sorry. I can't see. Jason, go ahead.
I'm in your blind spot.
Yeah.
No, I think the tour was fantastic. I thought it was an eye-opener. I know not many people are privy to go down and see the entirety of the police department, but it's amazing how much they can do with some of what they have. And doing some of the wouldn't say complaints. I mean, they're very gracious. Some concerns there. So again, I don't think it's something that we missed. I just think it's something that was together at some point. But yeah, quite eye-opening.
Thank you. And you know, I think it's not included in the vision because it's not necessarily a vision statement, but your sentiment that, you know, the emphasis on how great the people are was something that we heard last time too. So I appreciate that feedback.
Right. It's because I saw them there for years. I was on a mission to get the E out of hole. This close. Yeah, city council was that close until I don't know, was it a great supporter or so yeah, that's like been making me crazy for 15 years. And it seems like an opportunity.
And it is. And you're not ready. You're not ready to let it go, huh? No.
So I have to ask for clarification as a non-resident. Am I wrong in my minutes, or are you saying that it is an E?
That's a marketing vestige in like after the rest of the country gave up on the old English thing, Issaquah added an E, and it will go away.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other additional thoughts? I had one, and I don't know, this probably came up in the third place conversation, but really when I think about kind of a civic facility or new city hall in combination with maybe police, it's not just about the inside space that we're thinking about. It's about a combination of active outside space that could be used for civic purposes, celebrations, community celebrations, or cultural celebrations, or just a place where people can come and see art or whatever might be there. So I think when I think about, you know, a city facility like this that we're talking about, it's more than just what's inside the walls, it's what's outside too.
Thank you. Any other feedback? I don't see any cards turned up.
Oh, got a couple. Okay. Carolyn?
Thank you. Having been on the tour, I am so impressed with what the staff have been dealing with and how well they've been coping with it. But I would love to get them some solutions sooner rather than later. And being a numbers person, I'm also curious about cost effectiveness, budget. I'm a little fuzzy about our process. How do we get from point A to point B and getting the solutions, getting the budget? How can we get there sooner rather than later?
Would you like me to respond to? I mean, do you want us to talk about that right now?
Whatever the process might be, or at some point we can get a better understanding.
Lori, would it make more sense to hold off on that?
I can address it when I present.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Lori, you'll speak to that later tonight. Okay, great. Gail.
So after the tour, I think that the line item that says keep police safe is totally insufficient for the magnitude of the problem. It doesn't put enough detail into the facilities requirements that the police have, or in the case of our current police, things they don't have. And the big one is the profound amount of storage. Right? I mean, they have records, textbook gear, surrendered firearm. This goes on and on and on. And so just to say keep them safe, I don't think does it justice. So we need that needs to be understood, that just give them a building with X amount of square feet, that's not going to
Safe, secure, and functional, right?
well, and Montreal has about 37.
Right. Any additional thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, but
So,
as part of what we're looking at, we talk about the police facilities, but I was under the impression after our first meeting that the issue is really with the police offices and and the place where they do business. But after the tour, it's a lot more than that because it encompasses the entire jail as well, correct? Because a lot of our tour focused on how the jail isn't being used properly or how it's non-functional. And I was thinking to myself, wow, to remodel this place, we're gonna have to displace a lot of current inmates. And so anyway, I just want to make sure that that's always that's also on the agenda and part of the constant discussion about what's going to happen with that building.
Mitch, just for clarification, when you say you want to make sure that we're focused on that, are you saying just awareness of what needs to happen?
Yeah. Because after our first meeting, I didn't realize that the actual jail itself was in the state of non-functional use that it's in.
Okay. Thank you.
I thought we were just mostly talking about how to use the second and third floor better, or the main floor and the top floor.
So I may be mistaken, I think you're both dead on. Is there already sort of a general plan budget for what it would take to make that building, including the jail, functional, safe, and everything? That was sort of what the sense I had. So they knew what needed to be done, the city knows what needs to be done, and then it's what do you do with the people on the second floor?
I can help answer.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like wiggling in my seat. So the scope of the work that we're working on with DLR right now is very much the police space on the top 2 floors. It is not remodeling the full jail as a project. Right now, there is a separate project to look at how much we're paying for the jail, how much revenue we're bringing in. So we're doing that assessment as well internally to really start thinking about the long-term needs for running a jail. But our focus of DLR is very much where do City Hall staff go? And then how do we make sure that the other 2 floors of the building are functional for PD?
The other 2 floors being...
I'm sorry, the main floor and the top floor. Yeah. But we did bring you through the jail just so you can kind of see that's the full building, right? And that's part of the operations that PD has. That has some space needs as well in running a jail downstairs. That helps. So that work's happening concurrently right now as we look through the jail.
Yeah, are you up for more comment, or is that from last?
No, I'm back. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the tours. It's kind of interesting the focus and what he came away with was completely different than the focus and what we saw at our tour.
Then your tour guide was.
We didn't spend that much time in the jail, right? We almost didn't get down there.
Oh wow!
There was an incident,
Oh.
so we went. We got caught coming short. So I don't have as much of a feel for what the jail might or might need or where it would fit into as I do for the second 8 tours. But it's curiously, not all tours are the same. So there's probably a point of discussion at some point to bring what each of us took from our individual tours to get a greater summary.
Eric?
Not to get too deep into the weeds on this whole police facility, but getting back to someone else's comment about the process here and the timing of dissemination of information. I'm just curious to know at what point in our process here will we start understanding what the scope of renovation costs would be for that building.
Okay. Well, Lori's going to be sharing some, talking about what's in this facility today. We'll be coming back to meeting 3 with some blocking and staffing based on some of your input today. We were, in terms of number, recall what?
I think it's meeting 5 or 6. 5.
5 million.
No.
No, in terms of what?
Meeting 5.
Yeah, we're not at a point today where we can give you a number.
Right, not today.
No, I understand. But just, so you're saying meeting 5?
I think so. And they'll be wrong numbers. So order of magnitude numbers, not a specific cost estimate, right? Just to give you a scale.
which will be a scary scale, just a warning.
Mitch.
So as long as we're talking about remodeling and dollars and budgets and things like that, on our tour, one of the things that we talked about quite a bit was, besides just the functional aspect of how the offices are set up and where the storage rooms are and how the circulation of the police officers move through their space, is the seismic inadequacy, apparently, of the building, which was built in 1990. And I think the only reason why it's now seismically inactive is because we changed building codes to the IDC. But to seismically retrofit a building, that's a lot of money. And so I was just curious if we were going to look at, if the architects were going to present to us why it's seismically inadequate and what the proposal would be to actually seismically retrofit it to bring it into current IDC codes. And if you have any experience with base isolation.
You have a seismic or an engineering assessment that was completed relatively recently.
Yes.
And I believe that is included in documentation that was provided to the task force.
I don't believe it is. So it's something we can share.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's one of those blocks that you were talking about. There's a bunch of pieces here. Seismic adequacy is another block that would need to be contemplated too.
Yeah, because when you're getting into that, it's a lot more than moving a few walls around and, a typical tenant improvement. That's big time stuff.
Yes. And not to get deep into the weeds on base isolation, but to answer your question of does the architecture firm have experience with that? Yes, the answer is yes. We see, it's much more common in California, where we do have offices than it is here. But
okay.
Okay, so let's do one more, and then we've got to probably move on to the next topic. Keep on track.
On tour, there's a lot of discussion from the police on keeping the police safe. I came away from the tour thinking that there need to be some improvements to keep the public safe. For example, you have a senior center and a playground right outside the door where they let their prisoners. There's cruisers parked right on the main street. So public safety is being considered as well in this place.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Okay, thanks, Justin. So next topic is really looking at space needs for both the police and city hall. And Lori is going to lead that item.
So I wasn't here last time, but my name is Lori Koppenrath. I am a principal with DLR Group. I lead our justice and civic practice in terms of planning. So I've been doing planning for justice facilities for about 26 years now, a very long time. I have a master's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in psychology. And so that's kind of where I came to this. I'm not an architect or an engineer. I understand the operations side and help meld that with what a building can do to provide the right environments for everybody inside. And so I've been exclusively working on justice and civic type facilities like this one my entire career. So I have a good idea of what these buildings need and what the operations need and what best practices is from across the country, because I work across the country. Any questions on that? Okay. So spent a few days, talking to all the different departments in the city and with the police department, and talked with them about what best practice space needs would be for them for the next 20 years. Because it's not worth really planning a building that would be for 5 years. We're looking at 20 years. Anything more than 20 years is kind of not a good way to go, because you have no idea what's going to happen there. So we really picked a 20-year horizon as our sweet spot for planning. And so after talking with everybody in the police department, we've divided up their different support spaces needed into these components. So lobby, staff, support, records, support services, patrol, and detectives and dispatch. And if we were to build a best practice facility for them, it would be about 29,700 square feet. And that's gross square feet. So that's if you take all the spaces within the building and then all the circulation space in the outside of the building. So that's the entire building. And so the existing building is a little bit less than that. And so we know that during design, we're going to make a few compromises here and there. Maybe somebody's supposed to have a 150 square foot office, but they'll get a 130 square foot office. Those sort of things will be compromised that will help get us to where the building, what
square footage is actually in the building at this point. So we're pretty comfortable with this number going to fit into the building as it is now. So the next process, so we've just finished the state, like we're understanding what the state needs are. The next step will be for us to understand what the priorities are for the police. So they're going to go through all the spaces and understand, what the top priority is for them. It's a briefing room, it's a locker room, whatever it is, and label those as such. And then maybe what the third priorities are. And those are the things that get more compromised than the others. So we're working on that right now. And then the design team will come through and do two options. Basically, one which is maximum radius. So how much of the walls in the existing structure of the building can we use to maximize cost, like minimize cost, maximize the existing use of the building? And then what is the maximizing best practices? So that's basically gutting the building and starting again, kind of an idea. So those are the two diagrams that we'll be coming up with to understand how best to use that building for the police. Any questions on the police? What we have? Please.
Okay, so, Jonathan.
The question I had is in your review of other police stations, is a weight room required? Is it something that's done all over the country? Seems like a weight.
Typical to have a fitness room in a police station, yes, typical. There are some jurisdictions, I was just working with Lincoln County down in Oregon, where they are giving their officers membership to a local gym instead of having the fitness room in their facility. But I've not planned one that besides that one that doesn't have one.
Thank you.
Yep. And usually what goes along with the fitness room is a mat room or a DT room, defensive tactics room, which is a big open empty room that's padded so they can practice basically interaction with people and see if they can get up.
This is the minor one. So in terms of the square footage that's available, you're meaning square footage available in the whole building. City Hall's moved out, the whole building belongs to the police. Then it meets this close to this 29,000 number.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's
Not including the gym.
not
Yeah.
Eric?
Not to go backward, but have any thoughts been given to whether the police should stay in that building? Were there any discussions about alternative locations?
Not at this point. At this point, I might have something else to say, but at this point, we've talked about what their space needs are. We haven't even put pen to what that would look like in an existing building. And there is, you can answer first and then I'll say.
When we started this project a couple of years ago, we went through that exercise with the city council. And again, very rough order of magnitude, even a couple of years ago, the idea of if we were to build a new police station with a jail and a gun range when purchasing property, the whole deal, it was like $75 million.
Yeah.
And so as we started kind of thinking through what those options were, it was like, well, we already have this facility, right, that can somewhat, definitely meet the space needs long-term, as long as we get City Hall out. So that, that was very much of interest versus building brand new. So just as the background for that discussion happened, as far as us thinking through those options, we were a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Councilman Marks wants to add.
Sure. So 75 million sounds like a lot of money unless we decide it costs $100 million to retrofit the building. So I agree with you. It was an eye-watering number at the time, but I think that the deficiencies in the current building are a lot better understood than the last time we talked about it. I worry about the cost of retrofitting the building because it's so, as a lot of you know, my son works for King County Sheriff's Office and they have, it's not a bunker, but it is a building that is extremely high operational. That building is going to work no matter what happens. You could have an insurrection. That building is going to be operational. And we are so far from that building. And I worry that $75 million number, it's not an obvious trade to me that it wouldn't cost something like that to retrofit the current building to proper code or to cross to, best in class or the standard that you're used to working with.
And just to be clear, when you say entire building, that includes the jail?
Well, I think you have requirements, right? So for instance, shadow resistant windows, right? Just to pick one.
Yeah.
Right? So you have a whole list of requirements. You say, if the building is going to meet these requirements, what does that mean? And it's not obvious to me. It might not work. So,
And just as part of the process, so you understand the process, as we get to those numbers, those wrong cost numbers, so it'll be a range, like $75 to $100 billion, right? That'll be the range. If we as professionals think that if we could pencil out a new building, that would be less, we would, of course, share that with you. But so we'll always be doing those testing as we're going forward, right? We know we're building buildings all over the place, and we know what costs are of buildings now, and understanding there's a bunch of stuff happening in the world that's making things cost more. We will always bring that to you. Understand what the city to understand what their cost decisions need to be.
Galen?
So on these, numbers per square footage, the staff and support only have to include the fitness center, that room, the locker rooms.
Yep. Evidence, oh, no, evidence. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so that seems kind of like a small number based upon what we saw. How many officers were you doing that? Because you've got 5,000 square feet for officers and detectives. We currently have 43 patrol officers, and for the 15-year growth plan, it looks like 60 or more patrol officers. So 5,000 square feet for that seems awful kind of small too.
Well, the interesting thing about patrol is that you don't actually have to house all of your patrol officers, right? So you need, I think what we have in the plan right now is 5 report writing stations. We have lockers for everybody, including a balance of lockers so that we don't have to worry about the ratio of male to females, right? So we have a little bit buffer in there for lockers. And in addition to that, we have space for enough go bags and for each officer to have some storage space in the facility. But we generally don't plan police facilities for officers, patrol officers to be in the building because they're not supposed to be.
How about, parking for the vehicles? Vehicles.
Yeah, we have a full list of the parking that they need.
Is that part of
the square footage? No, it's not. It's not part of the square footage. That's a separate site issue.
I didn't see that yet.
Yeah, I haven't shown it. We haven't talked about parking. It's a whole other thing.
Mitch? One of the things that was really helpful when we worked with the architecture firm for the new Issaquah High School, for the design of that high school, for that task force, is that we actually toured, I think, either 3 or 4 of the high schools that they had designed and built. They're up and down I-5, so we actually did it over a 3-day period. It was a bus tour. I'm not necessarily suggesting that, although it would be fun to see some of the police facilities that you guys have developed. If we can't do it physically via a tour, is there any plan to show it in as a slideshow or something like that? Because it would be helpful to see an example of a well-designed police facility.
Yes, it would be. And so we could do that. Just need to keep in mind that we're dealing with a renovated building versus new ground up, right? So there's a big difference there to keep in mind. But I mean, before COVID, we finished the Marysville Civic Center, and we just finished the Phyllis Justice Center. So those are 2 that we could arrange tours of, or we could do a photo tour. Either of those things.
Yeah.
Perfectly.
You kind of do that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Just some thoughts on this discussion. So I think as we're thinking ahead about kind of the recommendations that we want to make, we've got to rely somewhat on the experts, obviously, Lori and Justin and their team, as well as the engagements that's happening with police about their needs, because they're the experts. They know what they need. So I think we can make sure we're asking questions about, did you think about this? Is that, in scope? But getting into the details is probably not super productive for us to go into a lot of rabbit holes. So I'll probably reel us back up a little bit every once in a while if I feel like we're heading that direction, because we're not going to design the building. That's not our job. Okay. But these are good questions. No question. It's informative. And so I'm going to ask one. So is in scope hardening the exterior of the building as well? Because it seems to me, as Councilmember Martin's mentioning about the county facility, you need to think about security of the building, And it seems like there were some weak spots based on what we saw in the tool.
Yeah, there are definitely some weak spots in the building. And so overall, as we're laying out what the new plan would be, we would definitely take those into consideration and change some things. Like my big thing is that we should not have so many ways to ingress and egress the building, right? Should be a couple ways in, a couple ways out. That's it. Like, let's not let all these. It's just a lot of doors that are causing problems. So let's not do that. But yes, it's part of it. It's part of it.
Great, thanks.
Conversation.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, real quick, you may have said this, and I apologize if I'm asking again, but the square footages that you have, like the 1612 for lobby and community space and stuff. So you took what was estimated as needed and then adjusted that to gross square feet and then somehow applied a 20-year window to that. So it has sort of some contingency built into it.
Yeah, so I talked with staff about what their net square footages need to be. So what the inside walls, what the space they need to do their job is. And then we talk about, well, what growth, shrinkage, change do we see in your department overall in the next 20 years? Some say, well, I don't see any change, and I still put some growth in there. And some say, oh, we're going to get 75 staff, and then I'm going to like they're not. So we mitigate that as well, right? And to understand what the actual growth is. So I put the growth into the net square footages, not in any factors. So I have a few extra workstations. I have a few extra offices. I have some extra storage. Like I have those actual dedicated spaces as opposed to just throwing a 10% factor on them.
Okay. And then one follow-on question. The current main floor and upper floor, we know what those square footage are?
Each individually, I don't know. It's about 26,000 square feet.
Okay.
Gross.
Thank you.
I mean, used to be for parking lot, but I grew up in Boston, and there's the Boston Police Department and then neighborhood satellites. Is that something that has been considered, with you considering that, even if it's thinking, okay, in 10 years, maybe an expansion is putting something in the Highlands or putting something somewhere else where it's smaller, there's no jail, it's a place where officers can go, people can go. It just isn't a long-term option. Yeah, like a fire station, like the neighborhood, like, oh, we have a little police park, Crossroads Mall, I think, has like a little mini police department next to the Cinnabon.
That's going to have to be a city decision for a city of this size. I wouldn't think of doing that. Like that wouldn't be my first thing to think of. Because you're talking about Boston or Bellevue, those are significantly larger, right? So that's a city conversation, really. But for me, professionally, I would think that you're not big enough to do that.
That's my mark.
So one of the things that was publicly discussed 12 years ago when we discussed indexing Klahani was the fact that we would need some sort of sub-regional IPD presence up there, and the operational impact of that was substantial. So it's a thing that has come up in the past, and I would of course defer to the chief, but I think that there's been a big effort to try to not have to do that if we don't have to do that. And it was one of the arguments that folks made against annexing Klahani, because it would really have an operational impact. But the size of the police force there being slightly smaller than Boston.
Okay, we should probably keep track of money.
So City Hall, I did the same thing with City Hall. Had a conversation with pretty much everybody in City Hall. Maybe not everybody, close to everybody in City Hall. And came up with some square footages of their needs as well. Again, the same kind of process, talking about what their future needs are, where their sticking points are. Talked a lot about storage of paper and how we're doing a great job of not storing so much paper. We're just cycling through it the way it should be. It's really awesome. There's other jurisdictions that have a plan for it. They have 30,000 square feet of storage that they're paying $1,000 square foot to build. So it's fantastic how well the city's doing in getting rid of paper. Not that paper less means paper gone, right? Paper just means less, not creating paper as much. That's a big, cannot emphasize in my career how big a deal it is not to be storing so much paper in your square footages. So overall, we need about 35,000 square feet for the City Hall. Now, there's some conversation I'd like to have with you all about community space / staff meeting space, which is next. So I have a couple slides for each one about talking about community space and talking about staff meeting space. So in the plan right now, and this is all can be changed, or iterative design, right? Can be changed, is we have council chambers of about 1,500 square feet. And then we have a community meeting room at 1,500 square feet, a medium community meeting room at 900 square feet, and then 2 small community rooms at 300 square feet. If you go to the next slide, I'll kind of give you a diagram of what those are.
And just as a quick note too, this is more community meeting space than we had talked about a couple of years ago. So that's why there's some difference in square footage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so one thing I want to point out for the council chambers, just because it is a thing, this hatch part up here is kind of the immovable part. You can't really rearrange it. That's the dais. And said this is where your participants would sit. So that is rearrangeable. So that's just what those hatch marks mean. This can't rearrange. This could rearrange, but it's got some ways to get set up. And then down here is kind of where the audience sits. So that's just why that's marked up that way. So because people want to say, well, we can just use the council chambers as a community room. Even though they're the same square footage, they don't have the same functionality. So this is pretty much what this ensemble of rooms look like for the community. My first question to you is if you have any thoughts on, is this the right kind of mix for this city? Do we need something much, much larger? Is there a reason that we might want to have the community room and the council chambers open up to one another? You'll make an even huger room, like.
Council members have thoughts. So Councilmember Hall.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, having a fancy council space couldn't matter less. Yeah, like, and honestly, I love the North Bend model. It's another community room. They have a closet and they wheel up tables just like this. Like having a dais doesn't necessarily seem like something in a 21st century council building. You have everyone should feel on the equal level. Everyone. I don't know if anyone else has sat up on the dais, but it feels odd to sit above people and then listen to public comment in that way. It just, it's very strange. So like my thought would be, could it be possible to have 2 community rooms, and one of the community rooms has the ability to turn into a council chambers or for boards and commission spaces and things like that. If you've had any experience with those kind of like flexible collaborative spaces.
So the flexible collaborative spaces are great until they're not, right? So something, the bad F word in planning is flexibility, because everybody wants everything to do everything. And that really doesn't make things happen. The other thing is that think about the time it takes to set up and take down that sort of thing that happens regularly. And it'll be a lot of wear and tear on the staff, but also the furniture and stuff that you're moving around. So I appreciate what you're saying. There's different ways to design council setup, dais, that's not as judge-like as maybe what you have now. So that's just something I would think about, is understanding the dynamic of what that space is. Yeah, so like City of Maryville, we raised it very little, but we still have a dais because they thought it would. They thought they needed that civic presence, right? Provided that civic kind of congregation. But that's my experience.
Councilmember Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get in a debate on that side, but I think a certain amount of, I don't even know the right adjective for it, but I mean, the council does serious business and needs to, it's a decorum. I think that's valuable to have in space. But what I raised my placard for, I just want to point out that this would basically be getting back to more or less where we were before COVID. Because what we had before COVID was we had council chambers, we had the Eagle Room, we had this location. So I think of the Eagle Room as, it's not as big as council chambers, but it was a large community space. And then this room is sort of the medium-sized space. And then there were actually 2 conference rooms on the second floor of City Hall. There was the conference room that was back at the executive office. And then there was a conference room at the front up the top of the stairs and the conference room right there. So this, to me, feels like if you sort of squint and look at it, funny, it would be getting back to where we were, which worked well when we were a smaller city. I'm not saying it necessarily needs to be bigger, but I think it should be at least this much space because those spaces were well used pre-COVID. And we have really struggled since then. So I would love to get back to at least that much community space, which is what I see.
One thing I just want to be very clear, this is just what we have designated as community space. There are additional staff spaces for me.
No, and there's additional staff spaces in City Hall. I'm talking about community spaces where we held meetings with the public.
Okay.
This would get us back to that, about that level of ordering.
I'll do with Jason, since we haven't heard from him.
Thank you. My recommendation would be if there's a way to combine the community spaces so that should the council have to have a larger, there be some sort of overflow or something like that as available. Not you could fill a council chamber with a top or maybe not. And then the other question I had does not necessarily relate to community space. Does the council need like an executive session chamber to recess into?
It's on the staff side.
It's on the staff side. Okay, I just wanted to make sure it's us.
Good question. All right.
You said flexibility is a bad word.
It can be.
Yeah, it can be. Can you say more about what constitutes flexibility? Is it like, the retractable wall that turns suddenly we have the 3,000 square feet? Is that what you're talking about? Or?
No, I'm talking about you want to bring that. So as council chambers, as police defensive tactics room, as a computer training room, and as a food bank. Right?
Okay, so not flexible. Assignments.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Mitch?
I was just wondering if 1,500 square feet is even big enough. It seems like 60 people plus the council in there. That seems, I don't know. It seems kind of small for that many people.
Does it seem small these days? Or people?
60 people. How big is this room? This is about 1,500 square feet, isn't it? It's a little bit bigger.
This room right here, like this part of it,
It's an entire room, yeah.
like 800 square feet. There's no ceiling past the cameras.
What's that?
There's no ceiling past.
Yeah. No, it's nice when there's ceiling until you can count them.
Yeah.
Okay, it just seems like it was kind of small. I'm thinking about all the 1,500 square foot offices that I lease, and I'm like, could we fit that many people in there? Maybe.
Yes, I mean, you can fit that many, 60 to 80 people in there. The question is, are you having that many people show up, or you have more people virtually? What I'm curious about. I mean, that's the difference now, right? Is that a lot more people are doing things virtually than they are in person, and so we can't plan for what we were doing before. What are we seeing now in terms of showing up at council meetings?
I can help answer that.
Okay.
I can think of maybe less than a handful of times, I'd say probably in the past decade, we've had more than 60 people show up at a council meeting. And we know when that's happening, right? So we can accommodate in other ways. And that was before we had a virtual option. So that's been a game changer. As far as there's been a lot more that will, it's a lot easier to be able to just join a meeting virtually, provide public comment and not have to drive down. So.
Questions on this topic so far?
Oh, we got more about time.
And just real quick, I just want to remind, we've heard from most everybody, but there were some who were kind of holding back. So I want to encourage everybody to participate. I think we're all thinking. I know we're all thinking. So don't be shy. Go ahead.
And so, go back.
Sorry.
It's okay. So we're also thinking of using the council chambers or the community room and then 2 300 square foot community rooms as an EOC, so an emergency operations center. That's where those would be, and the breakout rooms would be the 2 300 square foot conference rooms. So if there was an activation in your EOC, then whatever scheduled in those rooms would get delayed. So that's not too flexible of use of those spaces. So then in terms of staff support, what we're providing for staff is 2 meeting rooms of about 120 square feet. There are 4 to 6 people kind of meeting spaces, a small conference room at 300 square feet, and a medium conference room at 500 square feet. So that's for staff to go and have meetings in. If they were to have something bigger, of course, they could use a community room. But that seems to be the sentiment about what people need in terms to meet. Then we just have a picture of that, the same kind of scale. So not very much square footage there, but still meaningful meeting space when you don't have meeting space like you do now. So
Real quick, clarifying question on that one. Does that include like small, because we were talking about virtual meetings now, pretty normal. And open office doesn't work very well when you've got multiple people in virtual meetings, and some of them are in the same meeting and they're on their computers. So is there small breakouts that are included in the thinking here, or is that?
Yeah, I do not count those in the conference room meeting space because those are for more than one people, but we do have spaces for staff to go and do like Zoom rooms. And those can either be hard walled or you can actually buy, we have some in our office, food pods basically that you can go into. So there's lots of options for those. But I didn't include them in this because there aren't meeting spaces.
Okay, great. So in the coming up with overall square footage, coming up with conference rooms, and I'm sure we'll eventually talk about parking. What did you assume about on-site versus remote folks?
So we assumed that again, we would have one workstation for every 2 staff. And anybody who was in the office more than 3 days would have an assigned desk. That's what our assumption was.
Because I am on record as saying I think that in 5 years everyone will be back in the office, and that and the unfortunate thing, I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent, but the unfortunate thing is that we continue to not have transit. So that we need. So when we get to that side of it, I want to make sure that we don't cook in too low of numbers here, because I'm just seeing every major employer in Seattle has said employees need to be back in the office with exceptions, right? But the vast majority of staff are back in the office, and I think municipalities are going to have to follow suit because the public will demand it. If companies are going to go that way, they'll expect it of their municipal employees.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Tola, I was at the Bellevue Chamber East Side Real Estate Symposium this morning, and that was exactly what was being discussed. Municipalities of all levels requiring their workforce to come back to work. So.
They just attended a meeting about how it was talent acquisition. The employees are demanding that they have no money. So I think you're going to have a meeting of mind if you want the best talent. You're going to go with a lot of people who have flexibility. You want talent to come in and fix it.
Eric? Yeah, I mean, to me, this is an interesting question. So I have 2 points. One, if instead of one workstation for every 2 employees, what would be roughly the impact of saying 2 workstations for every 3 employees, sort of edging that a little bit?
It is, and I don't know that it would make a huge difference because you honestly don't have that many workstations. Like you don't actually have that many employees, so that might make a difference of 4 workstations, right? I mean, I can certainly do the math, but it's not like you have hundreds of workstations where that would make a big difference.
The other perspective on this that I have is that, as we saw in Seattle and many other cities during the pandemic, you commit to real estate, you have leases, or you own buildings. And when workers aren't there, it's a huge piece of overhead that isn't necessary.
One other thing that I wanted to mention that Autumn and I had talked about is that right now we're planning for 48 square foot workstations. And those could be replaced over time with 36 square foot workstations. That would give you square footage. 36 square foot is what was planned in the study from 2 years ago. I just wanted to build in more buffer and give you that 48 square foot workstation so that you could adjust that in the future.
So now you're really confused. If going from one station for 2 people as opposed to 2 for 3 is only difference for 4 people.
That was a guess.
How many people work for the city who would need someplace to sit?
I'm not done with the numbers.
I mean, that
We can
doesn't
look at
like
that.
sort of
Yeah,
the key number.
yeah.
And then also projected out in the reality of either everyone will be required sort of for 10 years from now to be in the office, or no one will be. And the reality is we have an idea. So to some extent, we need to hedge bets. But yeah, I mean, yeah, when you said it's different for workstations, now I'm really confused.
That was just a guess, but it's
Right.
not gonna be a big number. It's not gonna save you 5,000 square feet. Or cost you 5,000. It's not a big number.
So yeah,
Also keep in mind that this only goes towards City Hall. It's not about City Hall space. Police space is different. They're more.
right. But City Hall, you're talking, when you go up to City Hall, and it seemed like there were 3 workstations.
We can, I don't know the number of how many you've counted for FTE, so we can, I'll look it
Yeah,
up.
that seems like.
Sure. Yeah.
So we have about 10 more minutes on this topic. I don't know how much more you've got to cover.
Depends on how much you all have to talk.
That's good. We got 10 more minutes. We can build.
And then these are other miscellaneous spaces. So we have an HR meeting, small meeting, which I think is really necessary for that, those conversations that need to happen. Parks has 2 small meeting rooms for their behavioral health staff. Because the behavioral health staff are in workstations, and so when they're meeting with a client, they would go into an interview room. We do have that executive conference room. And then for community planning and development, we have a meeting room at the lobby, so that at the counter basically, so that if somebody has a longer conversation that they want to have, or a more heated conversation they want to have, they can go into this conference room off the lobby and have that conversation. So that's the total of the meeting space that we're providing. Next slide, it just shows what those are. See a little bit of space. And then this is all of the meeting space, community staff support, and miscellaneous that we have. So I think the biggest question is how much sharing can staff do of the community spaces, right? How much are those going to be used during the day when staff will be working? So how much synergy can we have there in terms of using that space? So maybe one of the 400 square foot conference rooms could be used. They can use the 300 square foot conference room for that. Those sort of things are discussions that we need to have and understand. But I really wanted to get an idea of if you think that much community space is appropriate, and how hard to pull up there. And if there's any other types of spaces that you think should be provided.
So Paul, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to just say, like, obviously, similar issues in terms of staff space. That's on them. We don't know how they operate, whatever they need. They need more community space. I definitely think all my discussions with community space is tantamount to everything. Everybody wants more of it, and the more that can be provided, I think, is going to be better and fully used by the community.
When you say fully used, are you saying to be used 12 hours a day?
I mean, that might be to Parks and Rec. Might ask them that question because I know they're booked. Everything's always booked all the time now. So where that limit is, I don't quite know. But I know that everybody wants it. When I'm talking with families and people, we all want those kinds of meeting spaces and areas to do that. I do think there is some effort, there may be some push to maybe that has more covered outdoor space, and that meets that need or whatever. But I would definitely think that what you have here sound based on saying what things were pre-COVID, I wasn't around for that got us back to there. It's good that you're getting at least to that point, but that would be where I would always kind of push more.
Jason.
So I think I'm going to piggyback off Paul a little bit. I think part of the problem is, right, we all have a perception of what we think we would need. But I think as a group, we kind of have to take it on faith. The city is providing you guys information with their needs. And these are city staff who've been here for a long time. So at some point, it's like you kind of have that disconnect and say, take it on faith. This is what the city has said their needs are. So it doesn't encompass what they need. I don't know how big workstations should be. I really don't. But again, I'm taking it on faith that you're having this conversation. As far as community spaces, it's hard because it's subjective. I mean, I'll kind of go with Councilmember Marks. I know the community wants more space. I think the idea of having synergy on them is great. I don't see any of these spaces being used 24 hours a day. I think there would be a bigger demand by all means if they were available, but whether or not it's enough, it's a hard thing to answer, because again, I'm kind of going off Councilmember Mark's historical knowledge here when he says, okay, these rooms were used and utilized prior to COVID. So, okay, but that's kind of a harder question to answer. I don't know what would be full. I don't know how many of these, but the more that we can have some of these community spaces double, I think would be helpful. I know some of them, like council chambers, like you were saying, some of those are dedicated spaces that need to be, but the ones that are community rooms, if they can double as something, I mean, that might take need for both. And again, people sign up to use community spaces, this building included. It just has to be coordinated well.
Right.
But at the same time, like I said, I think as far as what the city needs, I'm never going to be able to answer it. And Autumn's going to be the one who can answer that a lot better than all of us. So like I said, I have to take it on faith. You guys are having these discussions. And then when the city's saying, oh, this will work, okay, this will work. So it's hard for me to get in their head and say, oh, I need more all over it.
Right, and I'm mostly asking like for community space, is there some kind of community space that you might have heard of or seen or thought of that you should be providing? Like, is there some sort of like virtual meeting room that the community really needs to do whatever they're going to do? Or would the community rather have like gaming, like what does the community?
And as we're talking just about City Hall, obviously the city does have other properties that can utilize for a building club, things like that.
Right.
Yeah. There are other.
I'm gonna go on Carolyn.
Thank you. I really love the Bellevue City Hall building. I spent a lot of time there over the years. I went to the Bellevue Essentials class in 2022, so it's post-COVID sort of. And they utilize the community spaces. It's very busy there. I probably later at night, it's not as much, but they've really been able to integrate. And we've got to see like where the dispatch offices are, where the cops are, the MAC space. That building utilizes, I don't know the square footage is, but they bring together a lot of what I'm seeing the needs for Issaquah is looking for on a smaller scale here in our city. But Bellevue City Hall is a great model, I think.
They're about to redo Bellevue City. And I think it's about 5 or 8 times bigger than those.
Right. Councilmember
Um, yes, similar to what's been said, this is roundabout way to ask you a question on. So, like, community spaces kind of branches off into two in my mind. Or there's like gathering spaces, people just preserving a room at the public library, right? Or even showing up and just kind of using a space. And then there's very well documented need that we've heard from the nonprofit community that they need space for meetings or meetings with clients and things like that. So, I mean, in your judgment, based on like how many groups that you've connected with, do you think spaces like this would be full 24 hours a day, or would there be a need to have actually make that distinction? Like this is reservable only for nonprofits? Or what do you think, Paul?
So I think, and I was going to bring it up at the end of the meeting, but I did send out a reminder that I put in a draft survey questions in our packet for you to review. And it's really heavily asking community questions about how you would use space. So is it more for a garden club? Is it more, do you represent a nonprofit and you need space? So I'm curious how those numbers or responses may change over even the past couple of years as people have kind of come back from COVID. So I think this is a good time to really assess that. I think also top of mind for me is we have other spaces at the city like Gibson Hall, right, that are now we're going to open up for community use. And so looking at that holistically as far as community center and a lot of more of the kind of parks and community services facilities that are open versus like city hall space, right? So that was my attempt with a lot of the questions to the community of just what do you think the need is? Just because we're not offering it, it's hard to know kind of what the demand is. And then we also included a question there too around, are you willing to pay a fee? Because we've also been talking a lot with parks and community services. I mean, all these things aren't free to clean and operate and lock the door and all of those other things, right? And so we know we do, but we do have, you know, once a month, if you're a nonprofit, you get 2 hours free, or I forget exactly what the policy is that Parks has, but we do have some cheaper rates for community groups or nonprofits. So we're just finalizing that policy with Parks. So that's a roundabout way of saying I don't think we know because we just haven't had that space. I do know before Coho Room, Eagle Room, those were full every night. Yeah.
So just, we've only got a couple more minutes on this topic, but just a couple of quick thoughts, and Autumn answered some of mine. But it's not just indoor space, as I mentioned earlier. Is there an outdoor community space need that hasn't been met that we might think about as part of this facility for gathering and festivals or celebrations, cultural celebrations, et cetera? And then how you program the space is, you have a lot of flexibility, you create it, and during the day, it could just be for staff use if the demand is high enough, and then it's available in the evenings for a fee, or for free for some certain circumstances. But once you have it, you can decide how you want to program it too. So you just have to make sure we kind of have enough to meet the kind of foundation needs and flexibility as a suggestion. And Bellevue City Hall had a lot of experience there too. I lived in that building from the day the doors opened, and how that community space was used changed over the years just because demand changed. The pandemic had a big impact on it. So anyway, so we've got a couple more minutes to wrap.
Yeah, this is my last slide, right?
I think so.
Yeah. So just to, again, for the process, what's going to happen is so that we're going to confirm the space list that we've come up with the staff. And then we are going to start doing some blocking and stacking diagrams about what City Hall might look like depending on the sites. And then we're going to start looking at and that'll be the first thing that happens. And because it's going to take a little longer to figure out moving all the pieces around the police building, the existing City Hall. But we'll be working on that and figuring that out, and then bringing those to you over time to understand what kind of preferences are and those sort of things. And then once we get down to a couple of options, we'll be doing some of those higher level round costs to understand what the costs are to give that information to you to help make a recommendation to City Council. So that's the plan going forward. You know, I'm going to give you costs right now. We want to wait a little bit till we get some more diagrams of what's going on, how much walls are moving, how big something's going to be, how much facade something's going to have. All of those play into how much it's going to cost. So we need to give us a little bit of time to get some more.
That's not just a clarifying question. So would that include, like, for City Hall, build new versus like this is the lease space, so we're constrained by this, and so we would have to lose some of these priorities in order to make this space, or is it just new one?
Well, it depends on what sites we decide to look at, right? So it all depends on the sites.
So we get our first.
Yeah. And there might be a site like, hey, can you do a test fit on the site for us to really understand what it would mean? That's fine. But for the most part, usually what happens is that we narrow down the sites. We don't have 50 sites, we narrow down to 2 or 3, and we figure out what the building would look like on that. And it's going to be a generic building that we're going to plan out for you, right? It's not going to be something that's got fenestration and materials on the outside and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be kind of generic, just to give you an idea of what the space could be.
Chrissy, do you want to make a quick comment? We'll allow.
Yep, that's a big part of the virtual activity.
The numbers do not include the jail, but they include all the other precedent building. And I did go through the jail, and I do have opinions on it.
It's a different subject.
There is a.
Great, thanks, Lori. Appreciate that. That was great. So the next topic is really a Q&A opportunity with Police Chief Paula Schwann, and I just Paula online.
Yes, Chief Schwann is online, and then we also have Tricia here, who some of you met. She guided one of our tours, and your title is
Communications Manager. So I'm
for Season 911. So I could feel a lot of questions, and
I'm here.
And Chief Schwann, yes, I was just kind of like introducing you, Chief. Okay. I could see a lot of questions and just a lot of processing happening following the tour. And I just wanted to make sure there's an opportunity that you could connect with Chief Schwan or others in our PD. If you had any questions following that tour that I may not be able to answer. So I invited Chief and Tricia here just for that reason. Thanks, Chief, for joining us. I don't know if you had any initial thoughts.
Oh, I have a hard time with the audio.
I don't have anything unless people have questions about the space. I mean, everybody's kind of seen it's, and everybody kind of like has been mentioned. There's different pieces to it. I know it's been mentioned about a different building. That's the hard part with also having it being a range needed and a jail. So those are the hardest pieces for it. We still have some of our people that do work remote, but only 1 day a week. We don't too often have too many that work more than 1 day a week that's remote. So the space is needed because everybody else has to kind of be there to do their jobs. And I do want to say also, because I haven't been with this group yet, that I just appreciate everybody taking the time and being a part of this, because I think it's very important hearing from everybody else that sees our situation versus it just being coming from us. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Chief. We do have some questions. So Eric.
Yeah, my question is, having listened to our discussion, Chief, do you think we've missed something? Is there something important that you think we need to be considering?
No, I think everybody's brought up so many different points and good points, and they do realize the space that's needed and all the different aspects of it. I haven't heard anything that has been missed at this point other than quality of life, understanding the importance of having a jail and the difference in what the community would look like if we didn't. And so I'm happy to answer questions on that part as well. So, but yeah, otherwise I don't think anything's missed that I can tell.
Other questions for the Chief?
Rob? Yeah, somewhere in the earlier discussion, I think Autumn said something about the revenue produced by the jail or something. How is that a revenue center? Like, is it other municipalities pay us? Is it?
Chief, do you want to answer that? How the jail works?
Yeah, is it does it net out? Like they pay us and then we send some people to rent it and we pay them? And if you mentioned something about what it's like other jail, like would we be sending folks elsewhere?
So there's an echo, and so I can't hear the question quite well. If I could get the gist of it, I think is asking the revenue from the jail. Like, do we charge other people? We have contracts with other cities. Is that kind of the question that was asked?
Well, I'll try to talk louder. It's do we have contracts with other cities, have contracts with us, and we get revenue from them? And I think in the tour, there was some mention of sometimes we send people to other cities. And so is it more of how does that net out? And you just mentioned, what would it look like if we didn't have a jail? Is that something that would be a nightmare or something that is workable and we just pay LU as an option, not to have a jail or have a much smaller facility?
So we have contracts, the people that contract with us, there's up to 14 other cities that have contracts with us. And so they pay us to house their inmates with us. We also have the contracts, like you said, with other facilities, but that's because they have 24/7 and they house more of our highly, what's the nicest way to put it? That need a lot more mental health care, or people that need a lot more medical care that on a regular basis, like, for example, someone that's got major medical concerns or questions. And so that's why we would house them at other locations. And then Other reason we would is if they, like our felonies, they all go to King County. And so we house people there. So we do have contracts with those SCORE, and that's more for medical. And then King County is for the felony. And as far as people housing at our location, we cost less than those other facilities. We have increased some of our rates. It doesn't cover all the costs. What I meant as far as we have looked at what it would cost if we just housed everywhere else, and we could do that. The costs would be probably, that's one thing we're vetting out right now that Dale is working on with me and the jail commander for what those costs would look like if we decided not to have a jail anymore and what that would look like. The thing that would be such a huge difference in when I was saying quality of life is that right now, for all of everybody that lives in the community, is that right now we have the ability to, when someone has a theft third or someone has a trespass at one of the businesses or any property, we can, in most other cities that don't have their own jail, have to take an officer off the street for, it would be for us 2 hours, take an officer off the street to transport them to another jail, or they get a piece of paper and we say, here, go to court. And then they get to go to the next business or the next property and they continue to do what they've been doing. So that's what I mean by quality of life would change drastically, because right now we have the option and people will stay away from our jail, our city, to commit nefarious crimes, specifically even minor ones, because of the fact that we go, all right, well, you get to go to jail. We have that opportunity, which a lot of other locations and people in other cities don't. And so that crime can increase because of that. I hope that answers your question.
That's great. Great, thank you.
Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Schwan. The tour was a real eye-opener, and I know it was for our group. Obviously, the Issaquah PD is a fantastic institution in the town, and I think the concern, at least, tell me if I'm wrong, is it seems to me right now the main concern is giving the police officers of the department more of their workable space for our officers. The jail may or may not be able to be retrofitted with obviously some safety concerns, some, things like the glass, some of those things, doors that need to be locked up, things like that. Is that kind of where we are? I don't know if I'm talking to, I don't know if this is more directed to Chief Schwan or maybe Autumn. But that's kind of my feeling as what we're here to do is really, it's more about the spacing needs that the staff needs, the patrol. These people, it's not so much a conversation about the jail. The jail needs some help, but it's not retrofitting the entire correctional facility down below.
Correct. Not in this scope right now. It's too much.
Correct. Well, and I don't, there are some things that, because the jail's been there a while, and there's things we are doing over time that, to be fair, have not been automatically put in the either budget by prior administration, but from the police department, not the city itself, but as a whole. And so, we need to paint cells, and we've been doing that gradually. That even this year, we've upgraded some locks in the last year. So those things, I think, are pieces. And you talk about the windows. So I would agree that that is not what we're looking for right now. We're not looking for something to be much bigger. We're not looking for anything to be or that drastic. It's right now we're just looking for more the working space for the everyday actions of our staff in general, the day to day.
Great. And then just a quick follow-up, I'll just share, what I learned from the tour is, the jail is an invaluable piece of community. And even though it might not break even, but what it does for us as far as having our own, really can't be quantified. And that was, I believe, I'm going to probably butcher this, Officer Kelsey.
Commander Allred, I think it's
Commander Allred.
Casey. Yeah.
So close. But he was a fantastic tour guide. He gave a lot of knowledge just about the benefit of having a jail in our community, and kind of, to Chief Schwan's point, we didn't have one. The all had a different feel to it. So even though it might not be a revenue maker, it's still covering a lot of its operational costs. But what it does and what it provides for the community is, like I said, it's exceptional.
That was me. I actually.
Chief, here's a kind of a broad question. So your vision for what the ultimate public safety facility would provide the Bellevue or the Issaquah Police Department if money wasn't really a barrier. And reminding you that there are two council members in the room. So, but anyway, what are the things that you and your kind of vision for meeting the needs of your department would you put on the top?
The question is, what would I say would be a top priority for what
in simple terms, you can say that. What are the top priorities? What are the outcomes that are most important to you? We'll reframe it.
I think locker room space is a big deal for our staff because of where they change their clothes and where, they keep their gear. And sometimes they have to change their clothes, not just when they come to work, because they have their own, opportunities if they have their take-home cars, but because they have to change often when they get into stuff that's not great. Is the best way to put that. And so I think that's a big piece because we don't even have lockers for all their gear all the time right now. And we already expanded what was report writing space into now locker room space for them. So I think that's one piece. Another space would be our dispatch center, hugely, because it's half the size it should be for the calls for service and half the size of the Redmond dispatch center. That's, a comparable for us that we have the same call volume even for the two cities that we dispatch for, or three cities, I should say. And so I think those are the biggest priorities, as well as we don't have any meeting space. We have one conference room that's utilized for, and also, to be fair, another priority would be that we're on a main level. Security and safety of people in our building, it was not intended to be on the main floor. For our records department is right outside our police department. My office has a window that anybody could look into, and there's no security outside. Anybody can walk right up to our space and basically blast the dispatch center. And, my job is to talk about and think about and consider worst case scenarios. And so that's where that's coming from. But in that entire main floor, people don't feel very secure and safe because there's threats all the time. Even our main door that's right across from the court is open to the street and right there. So, and that's right where the officers area is. So I think those are the biggest priorities for our staff, is just workstations for the officers when they do come in and do reports for safety reasons. And the next one, and dispatch is just such a huge part. And then the locker room space as well. So I think those are the three biggest ones. I'll let Tricia chime in. I mean, I know she knows dispatch is a big one and is going to be an advocate for that. But the other space, briefing space as well. I mean, when we talk about meeting area in the conference room, we don't even have a the briefing area is so small. It's packed and you can't even hear because of just the vending machines, or nobody could be, eating at the same time as when we're actually having a briefing, and it's too confined as well. So, but that, goes along with that meeting space. So those would be, I guess, the major ones for me. Tricia, your thoughts?
I would say the server room is a big issue. If we have any spark of any now, then we would lose everything because it's not set up for a fire. And I think our sergeants really need some offices for privacy. They can't have any private conversations at all with any of their staff. But they definitely need.
And neither can the records supervisor. Yeah, the records supervisor the same way. She doesn't have her own office either. Yep, she needs that as well.
Great, thanks. That's helpful. Councilman Marks and then Otto.
Sure, and I just want to come back for a second. When you talk about jail, understand that there's a vision for sort of a public safety constellation, and it is police, dispatch, court, and jail. And they have all sorts of interesting cross functions. For instance, after hours, when you call into the city, you get the dispatch. And dispatch is also able to control access into the jail. So most people don't know, but there was a concerted effort about 12 years ago by the county to consolidate down to a smaller number of dispatches. They wanted to force us out of having dispatch. And I and a bunch of IPD folks spent a couple of years making sure that we didn't lose our dispatch capability. And then a few years ago, we had a bunch of challenges, and our dispatch had to go be up in Redmond and co-locate up there for a while. And so these 4 pieces are really important, we feel. And there is an ongoing conversation about the cost of the jail and all that kind of stuff. But, our ability and our police ability to respond and the options that they have in keeping everybody safe in the community, having all 4 of those elements has historically been so important to us as a city that we were willing to fight hard to keep all 4 of those pieces. In fact, that all 4 of those pieces are thriving right now. It's a very, very big part of our ability to protect public safety.
Councilmember Martz, I was just going to say, we talk a bit about the importance of why we have our own dispatch. Thank you to that. So I love that question. No, that was perfect. I think another thing that I want to just ask as a question to PD is how important are facilities when it comes to retention and recruitment?
Is that to the chief?
Yeah, to the chief. Could you hear that, chief?
Yeah, I did. Retention and recruitment, as far as having the space. I mean, there are agencies in the recent past months and in the last year that have lost over half their department because they had problems in their building and people were changing out of portables, and it's huge in keeping the staff there, and it makes them feel appreciated and that they have their space to do their work. And that is a big thing as far as not just appreciation, but the fact that you have the ability to do your work. I mean, imagine if anybody at any of our jobs went and we didn't have the equipment to do the job that you needed to do, or you didn't have the space to be able to work and do your job. It's for anybody in that capacity you want to be able to have. And it's not a matter that people can't share space, because they do. I mean, we literally have 43 sworn, and we have 3 report writing stations for just line personnel, which is at least 20 people, because they rotate through and they can have their laptops and they have other workspaces. But that reality is, they've managed that and they kind of float desks, but it's kind of nice. Everybody knows to have your own space, or at least somewhat where you know who you're sharing with. So I just think that's super. Other departments that had less, and we had more desk space than we have now. And so you're not having to manage your time that much. So that's huge in keeping people and people wanting to be there, wanting to stuff to do their job to the best of their ability as well.
Great, thanks. So I don't see any other questions, and we're pretty much out of time on this topic, but thanks, Chief Swan, for spending time with us tonight. Very informative. So lots to think about. So moving to our next topic is really introduction of City Hall site opportunities. And Autumn's going to walk us through those.
So we did not have this topic slated so early in our meetings, but after doing the tours, a lot of us kind of stopped at Coho Room, and it was immediate, like, where is City Hall? What are our properties? Like that brainstorming just started to happen right away. So I just put this together quickly as just some of my thoughts, and our staff, as we've been brainstorming ideas. I just wanted to give this to you now so that you have time to sleep on it again. Like you're saying, sleep on it, think about it in the next few weeks. This is not just the one and only time that we'll be talking about this, but I just wanted to start some ideas flowing. Just to start. Chief Autumn? Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have one more thing I wanted to mention that I don't know that's been brought up in any of the tours, and that is a consideration that should be thought about as well. Our property and evidence room is another one that is drastically in need of enhancing. On top of that is, I don't know if it was ever brought up in the tour, that we actually are required by law to have a secured location to keep like vehicles. For example, we had a homicide years ago that dealt with a Uber or Lyft, that whole scenario. We are required to keep that vehicle for extended period of time. And we don't have the parking or the outdoor secured space. And for a long time, it actually was being held over at Public Works in that space. And unfortunately, we found out that's not even legal. It's not the space because a lot of people can come and go throughout the days. So now we have a created space that's up above, which is King County property. It's not even our own property that we're using. So that hasn't even been considered or even talked about. And I don't even know that that's been brought up, but that is a requirement by law for the police department that we also need a long-term, because if they choose to take or use that space that we have right now, and you only have room for like 1 or 2 cars up there anymore because we have so many in there. So when we get a search warrant, we have to secure it. We are responsible for that. It has to be indoors. Nobody can have access. There's all these different guidelines for that. And that's something that I don't know that has been mentioned yet. That is another piece that we don't own that property that we're actually using. And if King County decides to come in, we no longer have a building to store that stuff in either. So that is whole nother piece to something that the police department is lacking and is in need of.
Thanks, Chief. I think it was brought up in a few of the tours, but maybe not all of them. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
So I tried to put this in some buckets. And we did this exercise before with the city council. We have some city properties that exist in Old Town. We also have a few city properties that are in the greater central Issaquah area. I talked a little bit about purchasing and renovating, but could still be an option, as well as leasing. And then, another idea, which was kind of mentioned the Bellevue, as far as you could have a front counter for customer service, and then staff are working elsewhere. So you would divide the two as an option. Starting with Old Town campus, a few ideas of existing city properties. Again, this is brainstorming. This is what's available. I'm just going to couch that about 1 million times. I was a little uncomfortable putting some of these on here. It was like, what was the first thing I think we said as far as brainstorming? Like, all ideas are on the table, right? So safe space as we talk through some of these. So some ideas are our senior center, the City Hall South building, as well as the duplex next door in Fire Station 71. I talked a bit about these in our last meeting. Senior center that is adjacent to Memorial Field. That is a property owned by the city. We also own the depot, the train depot next door. Could there be an option where we are rebuilding a senior center with city offices on top? There's been brainstorms of, could our council chambers be in the depot? Is there some kind of complex that's built around Memorial Center as an option? So that's been some ideas that have been thrown out. Fire Station 71, I mentioned as well in the last meeting. That one would be much more difficult as far as a potential location, just because we don't have a solution yet of where they would move to. We need a fire station. The next is City Hall South and the Doherty duplex. That property, we are currently working on moving our court out of, as well as some of our other staff. That piece of property would be available. So that is one that could be an option. And then across the kind of an alleyway is also a few other, the Doherty duplex. In central Issaquah, a couple other city properties that people have thrown out over the years. One is our at-work facility, it's our building, but that at-work operates out of. This is located on Juniper. To kind of orient you, this is Issaquah Valley Elementary and Dodd Field. And so it's this pink piece of property here. And here is Newport, here is Juniper. That can help kind of orient you where that piece of property is. This is a fairly large facility. Our lease expires with at work in 2033. The city purchased this property with state referendum funding back in I think it was after 1979. And there is the purpose of the state referendum was for providing funding for facilities that aid in mentally and physically disabled people. That requirement still stands for the property, but that this property also could be used for other potential uses as well. So that's something that we've talked about just a long term is one option. The next is one that I've been talking about with our Parks and Community Services Director, Jeff Watling. And this one kind of, it was one of those meetings that we had as a brainstorm, and then I just didn't sleep that night. So my mind was going in many different ways. But, one idea that Jeff threw out and would need a lot more, due diligence and work behind it is next to Pickering Barn. So for those that may have gone to our farmers market to the barn before, it has a large area of community lawn that is pretty underutilized, and it's right next to some pretty busy streets, as well as a whole bunch of parking. It is a facility that, like I said, hosts our farmers market. It's a very vibrant spot in our community. And are there ways we can leverage some of that city property to make it more of a complex? So anyway, again, it was one of those discussions that I was like, whoa, that's a really interesting idea. So here's I just put a quick snapshot for those that may not know, but it's a fairly large piece of, like I said, underutilized lawn and some parking. It is near Pickering Trail and Issaquah Creek. We'd have to really look at kind of wetlands and many other things that are involved in that area, but it was an interesting idea as far as existing city property, and very much near retail and Costco's new and improved headquarters. Just quickly for purchasing and renovate, some things to consider. One is limited inventory. Like I said before, Jeannie and I have been shopping and we've been looking and we've tried and have not been successful in finding something that would fit our needs and would be located in a place that's accessible for the community, that would have enough space for our staff and for community meeting spaces. Also, it is a waiting game. So, we've been looking for 2 years. It's pretty limited as far as what's out there. We also need to factor in renovation costs. So we have looked at a few properties and really started to assess what would we be inheriting and then what were we needing as far as actually remodeling that facility. And then just a consideration too of just purchasing property. So are we looking to leverage property the city currently owns, or are we looking to also invest more money in just the acquisition? Leasing. So leasing can solve some of our immediate police need. Several of you pulled me aside after the tours and just said, how do we fix this now for police? Leasing is an option. It was very loud and clear from our council members, though, that the minute we lease, that could turn into 10 years, that could turn into 20 years, that could turn into a very long time. In some of our research in the past few years, very, very few cities in our region lease. We will always need space for city employees. That is for sure. And so, leasing could be good for a short-term option, but there was definitely, and that's part of the reason this group is here, is that the council members would like a long-term plan for City Hall that we can be working for. Also in leasing, there's no investment in the long term, right? Again, we know we always need space, so dumping money into a lease is not the best use of taxpayer dollars. Delays the inevitable, like I mentioned. There are some options for lease to own that we have investigated in Issaquah and our opportunities. I would say none of those locations are really like that accessible or great for the community as far as service. So that's why I threw out if there's there is an option of creating a service counter or area for the community, and then city staff are elsewhere in a business park somewhere, right? Where we could be doing lease to own options. So that is another opportunity. And again, there's just limited options. As far as an idea for front counter with offices elsewhere, the idea is, could we remodel an existing facility that the city has for that type of front counter service and then locate staff elsewhere? This option would have really minimal community use, right, as far as spaces. So it is very much a different model, but one I wanted to throw up is just far as like starting that brainstorm.
City of Kent is doing this, right?
Having a civic spot. Yeah. As far as locations too, it's just something for you to think about, and we're not going to hash it out this evening, but thinking about where's an important location for these services to be provided. And a lot of what I've talked about tonight is in Old Town, is in central Issaquah, so along I-90 or in Issaquah Valley. And as far as something being more centralized, we have not looked, like, for example, extensively in placing it in the Issaquah Highlands or, in Tallis or in South Lake Sammamish, really centralized in where a lot more of the dense development is in town. But I threw this map up here as just something to think about as far as where you think or feel it's just the best location for us to be really looking at. So next steps, So we finished our tours. I think that I put this slide together after I canceled one of our tours due to an impending storm. But we have finished all of our tours. Thank you for your time and effort in going through that. As I mentioned, I have drafted a survey. I incorporated a few key items from this group, as well as some of the same questions we asked before around community use and space. We are ready to launch that survey starting next week, so that we can have some information back to you as far as data, probably in early May. We will also be coming back to you with some results from our community survey. And I don't know if any of you have received a copy of that in the mail, but it's our Statistically Valid survey we do every other year. And so that will also have a lot more feedback from the community around stuff like police services and how important that may be to them, or the feeling of safety in Issaquah, those types of things. And then our next meeting on April 22nd, will be diving deeper into some of these site opportunities. Again, I just wanted to get you thinking. And then we start talking through pros and cons and really diving into some of that discussion, along with some initial ideas maybe on diving a bit more into what Lori was talking about as far as space needs. I think that's the time check. It's probably we're
getting close. So my gears are already starting to turn on the whole conversation about location. And that's a big strategic conversation about opportunities and costs and logistics. So I think we kind of hold back on that right now. We don't have time to dive there. We only got a few minutes left. But Galen, you had yours up, so I'm going to recognize you, and then I think we're going to wrap unless there's some other questions you can.
Quick clarification on that. Even as far as 2033, understood back in. So the at work is a contractor. Somebody's leasing that space for private space.
The city owns the space and is leasing the facility from us. Yes, it's not a contracted for service. It's so nonprofit.
So there's that work is a nonprofit that's leasing the space from the city. City owns it. Leases that. At the bottom, we also say that the requirement for the services they provide still stands.
It does, but it's not exclusive, right? And so that's been a discussion: is that piece of property, it always needs to provide that a level of service, but it's to be exclusively used for that purpose.
Or in other words, the city still must provide that service.
No, on that property.
On that.
Yeah.
So are there any announcements or a burning question that we just need to deal with before we break this evening?
Well, not until now, maybe next meeting, if there was a public comment around like the right-of-way space in between City Hall South and the pizza place and the community center and all that kind of open parking space. So if not now, maybe at the next meeting, have we ever thought of this?
My wife has the same plan.
Okay.
One other quick plug. Please provide me any feedback you have on the survey. I'm hoping to get this launched next week. If you have feedback, please email me. But you heard that the city clerks great training earlier. Please don't reply all and have us starting a chain of editing the survey. So send any big concerns you have to me. We can work through those. So
great. Thanks. Thanks everybody. Great discussion. I really appreciate everybody engaging and lots of great questions and comments. Looking forward to our next meeting on the 22nd. We are adjourned at 8:29.
Good
20
job.
minutes. Wow. Nice.